Hello everyone, welcome back to Shock Talk. Today we've decided to cover a topic that we've heard a lot about recently, and it's kind of a buzzword or a trend word or whatever you want to call it, but it is the topic of soft-roading, right? So I guess we first need to explain to people what that is. So what's your impression of soft-roading?
When you have a P-metric tire.
Ah, that's a good start. What else, Shane? How about you? What can you add to that?
Gravel roads in Death Valley.
Right.
And using a CUV.
Right. So it's
mostly.
So it's off-road exploration on maintained roads, maybe, is a good way to call it.
I would say gravel, dirt roads.
Gravel, dirt roads.
Yeah.
So we entered into this when we started with CUV products, and we want to kind of give people maybe our take on, if you're going to do this soft-roading, what should you have with you in the car? What should you be prepared for as far as weather, environment, and things like that? So I guess let's start with the basic prep.
Well, I mean, before that, it's like maybe if you have a seat, like people with Jeeps and truck-based off-road vehicles might know a lot of these things already.
Right. People that have gone camping before.
Or just off-roading, like a guy with a Jeep. They know they need to air down. They know they need a lot of basic stuff. But with a soft roader, you might be kind of new to this.
That's
and
true.
What are some of the things you need to have and prepare your vehicle for?
Very true. I guess we should start at the very beginning. It's hard for us because all of this kind of comes natural when we pack a truck to go on a trip, or even drive to work. Some days it's like you need to have.
I don't think it should be any different than someone that is hard roading.
Exactly.
I mean, exactly.
I think the prep should be about the same.
I mean, yeah, it's absolutely the same. You're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
You get to the middle of nowhere. I think we should discuss, rather than what to bring with you, what to make sure your vehicle's equipped with.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not internally, but like for instance, every CUV sold with a P-metric tire.
Right.
Yes.
In fact, cab on chassis vehicles are sold with P-metric tires.
Right.
All Toyotas.
The only LT tire you get's on the TRD Pro, and it runs the 265/70/17 Terra Grappler.
So
right?
what's the drawback of the P-metric tire?
They're soft. They pick up everything.
So we're saying don't even go out on the roads with them?
I wouldn't.
No.
And everyone wants the top end, the top shelf. They want the top shelf RAV4. Whether there's the Adventure
top
Series,
shelf.
TRD off-road RAV4,
what's that there is the top shelf one. It's like the Timber or the.
No, it's the Adventure.
So do they put
Series.
non-P-metric tires on those? Or?
No, they're all P-metric.
Okay.
Even the Falcon that they put on the TRD off-road RAV4 is a P-metric tire.
Right.
Granted, dealerships do this for a solid reason, and I just had a failure. And it's so that when you jump in this car and you drive it, it's nice and cush. There's a whole the sidewalls are real pliable. You get a lot of movement. So that's basically accounting for the lack of suspension.
Right.
The sidewall and the tires, the P-metric tire can absorb all that in the road because the suspensions probably can't.
Right.
Well, there's a P-metric tire that's more of a street-going tire, but then there's also a P-metric all-terrain.
Correct.
So these come with a P-metric street tire.
Some come with the P-metric all-terrain, like the TRD off-road, like the RAV4, Falcon P-metric AT. The LT on the 4Runner TRD Pro has a 6-ply Terra Grappler.
They're all P-metric on all Toyotas.
Except the Pro is an LT.
The Pro's an LT?
Yeah,
Are you sure?
It's definitely.
So, soft-roading. Well, I got a story about.
So let me talk top shelf. So guys that want to get the CX-5 Grand Touring that comes with 19s, if you plan on soft-roading this thing, go right back to your dealership and buy the 16 or 17-inch wheel that the base model is available with, so you can get more tire under it.
Yes.
You are not soft-roading with a 225, 55, 19.
No. You need a 17-inch rim, right?
Right.
Or a 16.
Try airing down on a 19-inch wheel.
Well, you're not.
Well, that's what I was going to ask is...
So, yeah, number one rule, that's a very good point. You need, a 17? Can you do a 16?
Yeah, if it clears the
15?
caliper. So here's how you determine that. You look at base model and you look at Highline. If you want the heated seats and the ventilated seats, fine, get a Grand Touring CX-5. But if you want to take this CX-5 places, look at the base model CX-5 and see what size wheel that has. Probably a 16.
Well, for the people that aren't understanding this conversation, what the guys are talking about is that on most of these vehicles, you have more rim than you have tire. And that's a bad thing because your tires and rims are what protect the vehicle from the rocks and stuff on the road. So what they're talking about is increasing the height of the sidewall on the tire so you get a more comfortable ride and a more safe ride.
As you increase trim levels,
right,
typically it increases rim size.
Which decreases off-road ability.
Which decreases your ability to...
So in our opinion, tires are pretty important.
Well, probably is the first part of your suspension that touches the ground.
Right.
We make TerraSport, but the most important, that we've talked about this before.
Right. Tires connect the car to the ground.
Guys doing $30,000 builds and then putting a Lionheart tire on there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like tires are the first part of your suspension that makes contact with the ground.
Yep.
And that is
control.
critical.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you don't plan to lift it, you get a 16 versus a 19, you actually have a larger tire, not larger in overall specifications, but larger in the way that it's usable in off-road terrain. So you can air that thing down. You're still far away from that lip, so you don't, what's called run flat. Run flat's a big thing. So it's when your tires ran so low that it creates this line on the sidewall of your tire because the rim's actually touching it. That's what happens with larger diameter tires. Garrett brought up a great point. He says, what if the higher trim levels
have bigger brakes?
Mm-hmm. And that's something you need to figure out. Now I'm going to tell you, CX-5, no. RAV4, no. Those things are, when you get into even the 4Runner. The 4Runner uses the same caliper, same pad, same everything as the SR5 so there's a lot of these that you don't run into an issue with. Now, if you're building a Safari-style Porsche 911 GT3...
You're going to have issues.
You might have issues because you're going to have the carbon ceramic brakes on it. You're going to have the bigger calipers, the bigger rotors. So you're stuck with a minimum of a 20-inch wheel.
Yeah.
So the rim size, the tire size, the rim size is very important because you want to air down.
The tire construction and tire size, very important.
Yeah, airing down. Mm-hmm. So let's say I take this
RAV4.
I take this RAV4.
We usually talk about 4Runners.
Say I take
so now
we're softening it up. We're softening it up.
We're
softening it up.
RAV4 this time.
Let's soften it up. So let's soften it up.
It's always a Toyota. This time it's 4.
No, let's go MX. Let's go CX-5. So we're driving this new CX-5 down this graded road at 35 psi. The car is going to start falling apart around you
because it's going to be super harsh. Because what's a graded road usually has a bunch of washboard.
Yeah, or stutter bumps.
Yeah,
the little braking bumps and things like that, which makes
you air that tire down to 18 psi.
Comfortable.
And then it absorbs the washboard.
Feels like you just put a long travel kit on it.
Yeah.
Right? Am I right?
Yeah.
But if you air down to 18 psi on a 19-inch wheel, your rim, every time you hit any sort of sharp edge,
rim's hitting
the rim's hitting the tire. Bam, 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 bam.
So you don't want to do that.
Yep. I mean, we talked about airing down.
So let's talk about the difference between a P metric tire and an LT tire.
Yes.
Do it.
P metric means passenger car load rating.
Right.
That means on a P metric tire, you will never see load range C, load range D, load range E. They don't have a load rating. They're a passenger car tire.
And they're a softer
sidewall
ply.
Mm-hmm.
So they ride more comfort.
Yep.
More comfortable.
That's correct. LT tire has a much more robust sidewall.
And so what does LT stand for?
Light truck.
Mm-hmm. And a more robust sidewall lets us do what?
Air down.
Right.
So you have 6-ply, which is a C load range. You have 8-ply, which is a D load range. You have 10-ply, which is an E load rated. And now they're even up to like G.
Right.
They get up to F.
Yeah, G. And this is where basically Just don't even put air in that thing.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
It.
They have E1, E2, C1, C2.
Well, you know the reason why they did it.
Air pressure.
And at TPMS.
Right.
They had no choice. So I was when the TPMS started coming alive in 5 and 6, 05, 06, 07, you had real problems because you were at the top of that E-load range tire to keep the TPMS light. Now when 11, 12 came around and the manufacturer started saying you need 80 PSI in the rear on an HD and you need 70 in the front, well, max tire pressure on an E-load 10-ply is 80 PSI. So now you warm that tire up, you're at 90 PSI.
And your dash light's going off.
No. You're going to blow the tire up.
Right.
You know what I mean? It starts oblonging. Regardless of how good the quality of the tire is, overpressurized tires are terrible.
So you brought up 2 good points that I want to address real quick before we get off track too far. So we've already identified that selecting the correct tire for going out in the middle of nowhere is very important. We also
super important.
Super important.
And, before you get off that, part of the TerraSport line is that you can put a better all-terrain tire,
larger tire. Yeah.
And I've heard, when we were doing the TerraSport, I remember reading a story. A couple went to Death Valley in a Subaru, blew out 2 tires, and tried to walk out. Somebody died.
Right.
So if you're way off the pavement,
super important. Yep.
Like the tire's going to take you out, and you're going to be stranded.
And before you decide to die out there, just drive it on the rims.
Exactly.
I know, but you know what I mean? It's like the tire is super volatile. You need to take that really seriously.
We've all watched Cops.
Yeah.
We've all watched an episode of Cops where a guy's cruising down the freeway at 100 miles an hour
We
with
throw
2
the tax
blown
strips
tires.
out.
Rims are good for at least 100 miles.
Oh, yeah.
I would think
At
so.
speed.
Yeah.
But you need to take that seriously.
So when you start, we've got the tire thing kind of organized here.
Well, before that, though.
Not again.
Before we get off the tire, so you're a Softroader. You have a cross track. You've got a TerraSport set up on there. Are you going to do a P-metric all-terrain or an LT all-terrain on a CUV?
And this is where it gets dicey because a lot of manufacturers, they're now on board. The last maybe 5 years, they've been getting on board with building tire sizes in an all-terrain that encompass the CUV market.
Yes.
However, a lot of them are still P-metric.
Yes.
So if you got a tire size that's only available in P-metric, that's the only option you have. Always make sure and ensure you have a full-size spare with a decent tire on it.
Yep.
Right? And make sure it'll fit in your well or wherever you want it, or if you want to be a real soft lander, put it on your roof rack.
One of the reasons why you need a full-size spare is because you're all-wheel drive and you can't run a smaller tire.
Yeah, you can't not match the tire sizes. And I wasn't going to skip away from tires. I was going to say there's some additional equipment involved in caring for tires, right?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to point out, and I wanted Junior's opinion. Are you doing a P-metric on a CUV, or are you going to try to go for the LT?
If they make an LT, I would, for driving characteristics daily, it would suffer a bit just because of the more robust sidewall, but I'd run it at a lower pressure on the daily drive. But if only P-metric was available, I'd have to go with the P-metric.
Okay. So just be aware that there's a difference in all terrains.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to walk out, carry a full-size spare,
Yes.
carry a tire patch kit, and
plug kit,
and also carry a compressor. These things are pretty much available at any store.
Any store, you can grab one on Amazon.
Exactly. So how are you going to air up and air down? Well, airing down is easy, but airing up afterwards, if you've got a long drive back from your adventure, and the gas station's 30 miles from where you turned off the pavement, make sure you have a compressor handy to put those tires back up to the recommended pressure before you get back on the pavement. And driving on aired down tires on the road feels very strange.
Yeah, but it's not too bad. Like, you're not going to be airing down to anything less than 18 PSI. Right. So at 18 PSI, and this is, I'm just being honest, to come off the trailhead and to air up 4 tires with one compressor that you're going to only have one small compressor in that car because they're all small.
You're going to cook it.
It's going to take forever, and it's going to cook the compressor. Just get to the nearest station that you can fill it up.
Well, I mean, like a Viair or
Right.
something like that works great.
But yeah, like a 400p, that's fine. But how much of that footprint does it take up in a small CUV?
It takes up a lot.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't want a lot. So you want just enough for an emergency.
Right.
Right. You when you're packing things in tight spaces, you want just what's going to cover you in an emergency.
Well, I mean, CUVs have roof racks.
Yeah, you don't want to.
Yeah, I mean, it would have to be up to the person. Like some people are okay with driving on aired down tires on pavement for extended.
I mean, next time you come into work and you're on the freeway, look at how many drivers on the freeway are aired down. It'll surprise you.
Yeah, they just didn't set tire. And now one more thing on tires.
Well, I think we should stay on the spare.
The spare, and one more thing on tires. Junior hit on something that you need to be really careful of when you're playing with tire pressure. They warm up, right? Mm-hmm. So you can. I read something somewhere that the ambient air temperature can change tire pressure by
6 psi.
Yeah. So when you're playing with tire pressure, be aware that whatever pressure you set it at, if it's negative 17 outside, and you set it at 30, what's going to happen when you drive on it?
It's going to warm up.
That's why I say it's okay if you air down.
Right.
In to 18, you get on the road and you have to drive 10, 15 miles
so
because that 18 is going to turn into 22, 23.
Yeah,
so you'll be fine. Yep. Just drive it. Don't drive it 3 hours home. Drive it to the nearest so you're not getting frustrated with your little portable compressor that's just screaming and pissed off and just maxed out. Like a compressor is going to get anything from 18 to 25 psi like that. Once that thing hits a small tire like that, hits 25 psi, that's when you'll notice the load.
Yeah,
the compressor goes from to
it's tired.
Well, and then also like when they have the pressure spec on the side of the door, if the spec's 35 psi, that's cold.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Cold. So when you're off the trail, your tires are heated up, and if you go to 30 psi, if you have the Viair and you go to 30 psi, that's going to turn into 35.
Or 30.
I'm sure at some point, if this overlanding and soft-roading trend continues, I'm sure there'll be plenty of mount brackets for your Crosstrek for a source nitrogen air tank on the side of the door at some point.
Yep. And you were talking
I forgot about that.
You were talking about spare. Now you wanted to cover something about a spare.
Yeah, spare. So take the spare seriously for sure, because that could screw you.
Mm-hmm. Don't leave it behind for another cooler. Right?
But this also goes back to the 19. So it's very popular to put on aftermarket rims on these CUVs. I mean, it looks cool, right? But let's just cover it. A lot of people do that. They put on a Method, KMC, or something like that, a rally-inspired wheel. I mean, I admit it. I would probably do the same thing. I love OE wheels, but it looks cool, right? But a lot of those rims come with different lug nuts. And your spare might be steel.
Right. Now you can't bolt it on with the high-end lug nuts. High-end.
So you got to make sure, exactly, if your spare is steel, it takes a certain lug nut. Your Method wheel takes a different lug nut.
Junior could explain that in depth.
On this, you're absolutely correct in the opposite form. So most wheels will take an ET spline style lug nut to try to make it lug centric these days.
Aftermarket wheels?
Aftermarket wheels.
Right.
Yes.
If you have a stock steel wheel, any lug nut will fasten a stock steel wheel onto the hub. Any lug nut, whether it's ET,
but not your fancy ones.
Now, if you have a stock aluminum wheel, this is where you have problems. So if you have a stock aluminum wheel, you intend on keeping the wheel aluminum. Most manufacturers have a specialized lug nut that fastens aluminum wheels, especially Toyota.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They use a mag wheel shank lug nut with a washer that's there for torque values.
Protect the aluminum, yeah.
So if you have that aluminum wheel and you have aftermarket wheels and you go to try to fasten that aluminum wheel onto your hub, cancel Christmas. You might as well,
not going very far.
You're better off driving you're better off driving with a flat.
Yeah, exactly.
Not going to work.
But yeah, really important that, and I'd like to do a dry. I even do it with a new car that I would get. I do a dry run on the spare. I have, like, before you go,
dismount it, check it
before you're going to go off roading someday. Yep. Can I change? And I have this wheel, that wheel, whatever it is. But the main thing is I've put a bigger tire on it. I've lifted it. I've changed stuff. do I have what I need to actually change
And
that
you just
spare?
covered what I want to talk about next. Exactly that. So do you have what you need to change the spare? How about your stock jack? Is that going to work when you're in the dirt?
That's a huge factor. I mean, as CUV, I would think it would work.
Yeah, because you're jacking it. You know, you're
Pinch weld jack. Yeah.
You could either use the pinch weld area, or change the position. Now, if it's lifted, change it to the lower control arm. Anytime you're in non-asphalt or concrete terrain, you should be finding a jacking point underneath the control arm, because it lifts the vehicle much faster.
Right. You're not pushing the suspension
Right.
up. Mm-hmm.
You're not drooping the suspension as you're lifting the vehicle. If you're going off the chassis or the frame, or the chassis or the pinch weld, which is part of the body, you're now going to droop this. Now you're jacking. You're running out of scissor.
Yeah.
So if you can find a safe spot on the control arm, that's where I would go.
And just do a dry run. Make sure.
And most of these Subarus and stuff, they're independent rear. So, I mean, there's definitely a safe spot.
Lots of places.
Another thing about jacking is a lot of times if you're off-road, a lot of times the jack, you could be in sand, you could be in mud.
Yeah, it just pushes it down.
Yeah, where you're
Yeah.
stuck is going to dictate how you jack the car.
Right.
Yeah, it's like be careful with that. Maybe carry something to
Block of wood, little sand foot or something like that.
something to kind of like widen that footprint.
Yeah.
I just figured out something that we should engineer for the Subaru market.
Jack
Lower-
footprints.
Lower control arms with a jack.
Oh, a little jack
spot.
hook on it. Yeah. That would be neat.
Okay, that'll be our next.
That's our
that'll
next
be our new job.
project. Okay, so we got tires, jacks, and Garrett came up with a good point. Now we're to the point now we're starting to think about other items. So if we were limited to 3 very specific items after the tires and making sure that we had the ability to air them up and change them, what would be the next 3 items?
Well, before we do that, I wanted to tell a story about P-metric tires.
Okay, you tell.
So every once in a while, every other couple of years, we do like a ride and drive with a certain customer. It's usually somebody different every time. And we go from San Diego, Anza Borrego Desert, and we drive to Las Vegas, mostly off-road.
Mm-hmm.
So we did it one year with Toyota. And they had a Tundra, they had a Tacoma, 2 Tundras, 2 Tacomas. Anyways, before we did this, I'm like, every one of those cars needs a full-size spare with a stock rim, because we were doing suspension evaluation. We didn't want to have to switch out to a steel rim, halfway out in the desert. So I think there was 4 cars.
All of them ended up parked with flat tires.
Every Toyota during that era had P-metric tires, even the Tundra.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a chase truck. And here's how serious we are with the tires when we're doing a test like that. We had the chase truck loaded down with tires, a jack, a quick release jack so we can get out. Because we don't want to spend,
All day, change it.
3 hours trying to like mess around with the OEM jack, and we're trying to jack up the car in the sand and the thing's not lifting. So we have a big floor jack on an aluminum, like they use in a chase tray. So I was doing this with our OEM group, and they're like, "Why do you need all these spares? This is ridiculous." I'm like, "We're not doing this trip without every one of these spares, without a really robust jack system." So anyways, by the time we got to Vegas, we had used all of the spares. Every car had a blowout. We brought plug kits, probably did 2 or 3 plug kits along with using all the spares.
Probably blew a couple right off the bead.
We actually destroyed a rim, blew a tire, poked a hole right in the rim. We were driving pretty fast, obviously.
You don't say.
The morning I went to drive home, we had a Tundra we called Papa Smurf because it was the blue color, and
The Calvary blue.
Yeah, we had parked it at one of the resorts, one of the casinos. I go down there to get it. No, it was valet park. The guy couldn't bring it up to us because it had a flat overnight. I had to go down there and plug it because we were out of spares. So anyways, folks, take the tire thing very seriously when you're talking about
It's more important than suspension. So I know everybody, they get a new car, they want a suspension lift, they want to raise it up, or they want to do something that you can visually see the change, right? Tires are the most important. We're suspension guys, and telling you that tires are they win and lose races. Yeah. Every year they win and lose races.
So if you're going to off-road, make sure you switch over to a nice
our buddy Doug
tire.
Matag at Parker. He gets 100, 200 yards into this race and has a blowout. 8-minute. I mean, he still won by a landslide, but 8-minute tire change.
Yeah.
So he cost him 8 minutes in a race, which understand that there's just seconds behind first, second, and third sometimes. So I'm not saying your Subaru is by any stretch of the imagination a race car, but just know that there's an importance level. What I recommend, buy the car and start writing what your priorities are. And in the priorities, make sure you put a reason behind it, right? Because
don't want to walk out of the desert.
I'm going to tell you, as lame as stock suspension is at Cars and Coffee, it's way better in the desert with a good tire than a stock P-metric tire with great suspension. It's just going back to what I mentioned prior. When I used to build Jeeps, guys would come in, I want a long arm and I want this and that and the other thing. And I'm like, hey, why don't we start with some traction?
Yeah, and along that priority list, so here's two other things I just thought of while you were covering the priorities on the vehicle. So in order for us to survive coming back from our adventure on the gravel road, we have to be able to start the car's engine. So a battery, right? We need to take care of that battery. Don't run your radio until 2 o'clock in the morning when you're by yourself camping because your car won't start. And without starting the car, you're walking out of the desert. Fuel, right?
Look at your fuel.
Don't drive the car till it's on 1/10 of a tank because you're not going to run into a gas station at the end of that gravel road.
So when you're out there having a good time and you want to bounce it off the rev limiter going down these washed out roads, probably refrain from doing that if you don't have much gas.
I usually, as a rule of thumb, always, if I'm going to do a trip, usually there's the last gas stop.
Right.
And maybe like figure out where you're gonna hit the dirt road and you're gonna like go here. What's the last place that you can get gas so you can fully fuel up that tank?
Right.
And make sure that you're...
And if that mileage outweighs what you can carry in your tank, then carry some sort of supplemental fuel, a rotopack or some way to carry additional fuel.
Just I would say, put a list together of wants and right by the want, put the reason. Because then that will probably shuffle your list around to a priority rather than a need or a want, right? So we need a priority. So tires, water, suspension, compressor, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just go down the list of importance.
Based on things you need to survive.
And you know what? This is going to help you as the consumer because you're going to go through this list and be like, oh, man, I don't need any of the stuff that I want.
Yeah, all the stuff
I packed. You don't need those Baja
Yeah.
designs.
I don't need my...
All the stuff I packed, we can just throw that back in the garage.
So you mean to tell me that
you don't need to bring Mr. Coffee.
that side decal on the Subaru that shows the forest is not needed?
Yeah.
No, it's not needed, pal.
And those very decorated license plate frames are not needed?
If you're not going to drive at night off-roading, soft-roading, do you need those Baja designs?
Yeah. You definitely need
And
to check that
your
list.
Subaru Crosstrek likely has a CVT transmission, so the stock headlights are fast enough.
Perfectly
for the
fast
motor.
enough.
But let's talk about the things you need.
Right.
You mentioned battery. Well, they have like these NOCO batteries that you don't need a jump start anymore, right?
The little jump start system.
Jump starters.
But imagine
that's like a perfect thing to have.
Like getting a flat.
It's a little trickle that you could put on there while you're sleeping in the car.
And knowing that your spare is dead and getting that second flat. Now, there's no way for you to move that car anymore. Same with the battery. I mean, if you can't start the engine, you're not going to push your car out of the desert. So fuel and battery are going to be super important.
Yes.
And not to...
I think water's more important than fuel.
Yeah.
I want to say that's like the first thing that I'm going to go out on a trip. first thing I want to do is water. Like,
Yep.
we went to Anzerbrega this weekend to go sniff flowers.
Yep.
So we soft-roaded my
Are you sure
giant
that's all you sniffed?
Bronco.
Sniffed flowers.
I'm like, we need water.
Yeah.
We only have like 6, and it's like, oh, well, that's enough. I'm like, no,
Water
no.
and a
No. I'm getting a case of water.
100%. And the minute you hit dirt, water and a high protein, like beef jerky, if you're vegan or something,
Right.
find a high protein
Granola
snack
bar,
that
cheese
you can
or
have,
something,
because
yeah.
protein and water is what's going to keep you.
Right.
I mean, I shouldn't be talking about nutrition,
Right.
but protein
should,
and
though.
water is what's going to keep you going.
Well, we started off talking about keeping the cars going, right? So now we're off the cars, and now we're on keeping you going, which is a whole different topic, right? You also have to survive. I mean, the car can still start and run, but if you're dead, you're not going to be able to drive it. So
Good pair of shoes that
Yep.
if you do need to walk out, you can walk out semi-comfortably.
Right.
I would bring something that protects you from the sun.
Yep.
I would bring like some sort of long sleeve that avoids chafing.
Right.
I mean, bring a jacket.
Act like you're going on a hike.
Yep.
Just take a set, your brim hat or whatever, your rash guard, and just stick it in there just in case you end up having to walk out.
Shane mentioned having a plan, and that I think is the key. Know where you're going, right? Know what the weather patterns are in that area. If it's Death Valley and you're in the summertime, it's going to be hot, right? If
Probably
you're going,
shouldn't go there.
Yeah. If you're going to Utah in the middle of the winter, like Fish Lake, somewhere where there's 9 feet of snow, it's going to be cold. So kind of plan ahead for the areas that you're going. We didn't even mention like snowy and icy areas where even a gravel road or a dirt road, you might need chains. So it's all about.
The most important thing is to qualify the vehicle.
Yeah.
Just know
That's
what your
true.
vehicle can handle and what it can't handle. I mean, I see guys.
It's like the 4Runner versus Jeep thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you remember when we were out at a couple years ago at Moab, and we were out at Onion Creek, and we saw that, I think it was maybe me and Chelsea, and there was that Toyota minivan that just got like sidetracked, and he was way out there
In the
with his
middle
whole
of nowhere,
family
yeah, cruising around.
in a rental Toyota minivan.
Yeah, I remember that.
Remember
Yeah.
that?
He's like, where am I?
Yeah.
How do I get out of here?
Yeah.
Hey, how about Onyx Off-Road?
Yeah.
Or Gaia.
Well,
But
Garrett brought up a
if-
good point too, is, pack like you're going to break down. And then we experienced that at Easter Jeep Safari. Is we went out with a bunch of people who supposedly knew the trail that didn't, right? And our nav system was down. And now how do you navigate through these little tiny tight trails that no one's ever driven on? How do you know how to get back to the pavement? You've been turned around 20 times. You're told it's a follow the leader run, right? Like, you're never going to get lost. There's a Jeep in front of you, but he doesn't know where he's going. So Onyx Off-Road. Some places don't have cell service, so you have to be careful.
Starlink's a really good option.
A lot of folks are carrying Starlink now for staying connected.
I think the nav systems on your phone are freaking awesome. I use Gaia.
But sometimes you don't have service.
Yeah, you won't
Yeah,
have cell service.
but that's where the plan ahead goes, because if you know you're going to an area, you could download an offline map.
Exactly, and I think that Garrett used the Onyx that way, where it was downloaded, so we weren't relying on the.
Here's my experience. So there's Gaia and there's Onyx are the big ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
Gaia's just maps, and that's great. But Onyx is pretty cool because you
God,
can
this is
actually
so crazy.
like pick a trail and it'll kind of tell you how hard it is.
Right.
This is so crazy because remember back in the day, we would have a piece of paper that big, and it would fold out to this big.
Right.
And we would have to sit there for 73 minutes and try to map where we were going to go.
And it was printed
That was
100
scary.
years ago,
Yeah.
and you're not sure if those roads are even still there
So
anymore.
all you new off-roaders are lucky.
Yeah, exactly. You have all
Well, yeah,
these-
I mean, like,
so-
so I would do a lot of high desert, Mojave Desert. So the best map for Mojave Desert was a AAA map, and it was this big.
Yeah.
But
You
didn't
almost
know,
had to get out of your car and open it
laid
up
on the
your
hood. Yeah.
So I mean, I'm younger. I'm out driving around my Nissan hardbody, and it's like you didn't know where you were some of the time.
You know what that Nissan hardbody would be worth today?
I don't
Yeah.
know, but like it was. I remember being scared. I'm like, am I really on this road that I think I'm on,
Right.
or not?
Right. And with
I'm not
that,
really sure.
With that nav system, the old maps, you didn't get a view of like where it's going next or what it looks like. It was just a road, and who knew if they drew it right on the map. So it relied a lot more on your brain.
But plan ahead. If you plan ahead and you're going to go to wherever it might be. So you're going to go to Mammoth, and you're going to do some soft roading up there on some of those trails. Just before you go, you
know the area.
You go to your Onyx or your Gaia, and you download an offline map.
Yep.
Yeah, and make sure you have things to charge your devices. Make sure you have, in case your devices fail, like a paper map wouldn't hurt to have, you know, like to guide you through in case all else fails.
I always try to have a paper map if I can get one.
And they also now have these very inexpensive solar panels that will charge your phones, right? So you can set that on the roof if the sun was out. And also, as stupid as it may be, or you may think it is, a lot of the folks in these areas that live in these areas monitor CB radio and GMRS. So those are really small, light devices that you can throw in the car where you could reach out to someone if you did have a breakdown. And part of the reason for this, for me, for covering this topic is we had some downtime at a recent event, and we were watching all of the episodes of Matt's Off-Road Recovery. And what we were watching was, just like Junior mentioned, someone goes out in a minivan, the weather turns bad, either rain or snow, or they pop all their tires.
Or
now it's a Matt's Off-Road Recovery situation.
Or they don't qualify their vehicle.
Right.
That's why Matt's Recovery is in business, because people don't know how to qualify their vehicle.
Yeah.
They get out there, they put it in 4 low, and they think they can conquer the world.
Right. Yeah, know your
Not
limitations
happening.
for sure.
Next thing you know, Matt's Off-Road Recovery is coming to get you.
Is knocking on your window going, we're here, can we drag you out of this? But yeah, that was...
And then you're signing a waiver. If he happens to yank your axle from up under the truck, it's not his fault.
It was really amazing to see the situations that people got themselves into, and it's like, okay, with a little bit of extra thought or help, like you said, most people don't really know all this stuff because we've been doing it forever, so... Just think about that when you're going out there.
It doesn't make you any more of a man or a woman to try things that your vehicle is not set up for.
Yep.
So it's a much smarter move to only take on obstacles that you know your vehicle can
Sand,
handle.
snow, and mud are going to be very limited in the CUV and the soft roading world. It's especially sand and mud are very, very deceiving. I mean, you can go, oh, that's just a little patch of sand. We'll drive through it and sink all 4 tires and be sitting on the belly pan.
Super fast.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah. And when I was saying, when I was building Jeeps for a long time, a guy wanted to put 20 grand into a long arm and 37s and Walker Evans bead locks and all this stuff, and he doesn't have lockers. And I'm like, you're going to look like a real turd at the base of Bronco's Peak, at the connector.
Sunk in the mud.
Getting passed by an XJ on 31s
A RAV4.
that has a locker.
A RAV4 with a locker.
So, yes, you can articulate on a forklift, but chances are you're not going to get through much off-road. So, also understand when you're modifying your vehicle, modify it in the way that it makes sense, which leads me to another thing. When making a vehicle purchase, we talked about top shelf versus base model. If you know that you're going to buy your CX-5 and you're going to put wheels and an all-terrain tire on it, and the top shelf doesn't have much more than the beautified wheels and some stuff you can live without interior-wise, skip it. Just skip it. Now, if the
Just more stuff
model,
to break out on the trail.
If the Highline model offers something like a front and rear limited slip, hey, that might be a reason to go with the top shelf. Right? So make sure when you, if this is trail use automobiles or you're going to explore in these things, make sure that the top shelf price has top shelf amenities that are going to work for you, rather than aesthetic amenities that do absolutely nothing, and 9 times out of 10 you're taking them off.
Or they come apart on the trail and they're basically a hindrance at that point. But Garrett brought up another good point that we should probably cover. We talked about getting stuck. We need recovery gear. I mean, if you're going to go out in the middle of nowhere, maybe some Max Tracks.
I was going to say, like, the first thing I want to check, do I have water? Do I have a snack? Do I have like shoes and stuff like that? The second thing is toe strap.
Yeah, some sort of recovery gear.
And always carry a toe strap. And also, with a CUV, you got to figure out where you're going to put that tow strap to tow you out.
Recovery points.
Because like a pickup truck might have a tow hook. That's pretty common, but I don't think it's super common.
A shovel to dig your tire out.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Put a piece of wood under there.
So on the CUV.
But now you're venturing into going into another level. Like, do you really need to put a shovel in your car if you're actually qualifying it correctly? If you're actually going to terrain, I don't think it hurts.
Now,
guess what? Now you have to find a place to put that shovel.
I don't think it hurts to have a foldable shovel.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then now you're.
I even carry one in my Jeep.
Then it doesn't hurt to carry this. Then it doesn't hurt to carry that. Next thing you know, you're weighted down and your springs can't suspend the vehicle correctly. You know, like know what you're gonna do. You know what I mean? Qualify the vehicle.
It also depends on
I have
where you're going.
never carried a shovel in my car. Part of it may be because I'm fat and I'd never use it even if I was stuck. But nonetheless, I've been off-road for 40 years and I've never carried a shovel.
I've always had one in the truck and used it a few times.
Those one little foldable ones.
Yeah, those little military type that
I mean, it's like
break
this
when
big.
you use them. Yeah.
Yeah, you just have to kind of, like Junior said in the very beginning, you have to kind of, and that's another thing. We probably all do this, but when I start to pack the car, I put all the gear out so I can see it, right? And I go, like Junior said, put it in, like if you're going to take a shovel, don't put it somewhere where you can't get at it quickly, or your recovery gear. Don't bury it under the seat where you have to unpack the entire car to get to that. So I start there. I got everything spread out on the driveway, and then I start putting things in. The things that you won't need to survive get put in areas where you can dig for them, right? And the stuff that you might need a couple times during that day, it needs to be up front. Like you need to be able to get at your water. You need to be able to get at your hat and your clothes. And
well, I mean, there's a factor with that too, with the recovery gear. Like, I don't think we really before that the thought on the tow strap. Make sure you know where to put it.
Yeah.
Before you go off-roading, make sure that you figured out where you're going to use that hook.
You're not going to want to tie it to the rearview mirror.
But the thing, But the thing is, if you're going to Fish Creek in the Anza Borrego Desert, there's 8,000 million people driving through there.
That's what I was just going to say. And also, when you're packing, know who you're going with.
Right.
Yes.
Right? So if you're going with 13 other Subarus and one guy has a winch hanging off of the front and another guy has an air compressor, leave your shit at home.
Yeah, you don't need it.
Because there's absolutely no reason to overpack it's worse on your suspension.
Like if you're going to a place where you know there's going to be people around, Big Bear, like you don't need a bunch of shit for recovery because there's people driving around. Someone's gonna help
there's
you.
going to be some guy that's never used his strap before in his whole life that's going to want to do it because he's that guy.
That's what I'm saying. Just carry a strap, know where to strap it. The next guy is going to come along and pull you out.
Yep.
But if you're going someplace that's not very popular,
Carry that
you
stuff.
know you're not going to see anybody for a couple days, then you need to take that a little more seriously.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's when it's really serious to go down your checklist is when you're going solo.
Right.
Or you're going with a buddy that cares less about a checklist.
Well, which brings me to another point is I've always been told that on the adventures where you're farther away from help, probably shouldn't try the solo thing. You should always have maybe another vehicle with
or
you.
at least a passenger.
Yeah.
It's usually good to travel.
That solo thing
I would
is
never
tough.
go without a passenger because if I'm stuck 8 miles into nowhere, you think I'm going to walk out 8 miles?
Doesn't matter who's walking. It's not a good deal no matter what.
Throw that guy out there.
Yeah, exactly.
You go get help.
Yeah. Hey, homie, if you want to get out of here, you're gonna have to walk 8 miles.
I would say
because I'm cool right here.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a beginner, like always travel with a buddy.
Yeah. At least another person or possibly another vehicle.
Another vehicle usually.
Yeah, now let's touch on this because most Subaru people have this is a dog.
Yeah.
So
Send
make
the
sure
dog.
you have a checklist for your dog.
Yeah. Food, water, somewhere warm to sleep.
Water, comfortable place to sleep.
Goggles.
Maybe an extra day of food for the dog.
Yep. So do your checklist, the car checklist, the dog checklist. That's and just what's important. What's important.
Survival. Yeah. That's what it's about.
And again, if you're out shopping for a car and those high trim levels don't offer you something that's going to make the vehicle more capable, why buy it?
So after tires, we've determined that tires should be the number one thing that people look at. The next most important vehicle modification would be suspension.
Yeah, you're challenged with a CUV.
And how are you going to get those bigger tires on without this particular piece, right?
Yeah, so we have this Bilstein TerraSport, and the beauty of it is it basically, you have the spring seat that usually goes over the tire where you're actually moving it up, giving you more clearance for a larger tire. So it's important to get these vehicles up just a little bit because you've got like things hanging down like the oil pan and things like that. You know, I remember back, the guy shows up with a Grand Vitara and you got to, like those guys were always punching their oil pan. So it's, you got to be careful about the oil pan when you're off-roading. You want to get that up. You want to get more clearance on the sides, approach, departure. What's the center thing? The breakover angle, approach and departure is to improve that on a stock CUV is really important.
And just to touch on this, it doesn't necessarily mean bigger tire.
No.
Okay, so if you want your vehicle to shift when it should, function how it should, don't lose a bunch of power, a tire upgrade doesn't necessarily mean a tire increase size increase. You can get a much better tire in the same size, even if you do lift it.
Right.
I mean, you got to understand
the wheel clearance won't be a hindrance because you're giving the suspension more room to move.
And likely, the tire that you choose is going to be a little bit heavier than what you're taking off. So you're already adding additional rotation weight into the drivetrain. So if you don't want to go taller, you don't have to go taller, but you can just upgrade what you have in the way of a much better, more robust tire.
Trying to make the vehicle more capable, more safe off-road.
But yeah, the TerraSport will get you up usually 1.5 inches, 2 inches.
Yeah.
And it doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a lot. When you're talking about a vehicle like
Junior
this.
brought up a really good point. We don't necessarily make this so that you can jam the biggest tire under there, but the quality of the tire is probably more important than...
Oh, quality is far more important than size.
Than trying to punch a big, giant tire. And using a bigger tire can sometimes hinder how the suspension moves and also tear parts off your car. So
I mean, if it was me, I'd go up one size.
One size.
And one size is great. You want to know? Here's my theory. Ever since I've been working on cars, what tire size do you want? And I'll make that happen. So let's say we're working on a Jeep. You want to do a 35? I'm going to do the smallest lift that it takes to fit that 35 on there and have room to cycle.
Yeah. Clearance and all that.
I'm not going to go 3.5, 4 inches on a Gladiator to run 35s. I'm not going to do it.
Don't need it.
Right? What tire size do you want so that I can do the minimal amount of lift, minimal amount of geometry change, minimal amount of components needed, right? All that makes sense. So with a CUV, my mindset is if I can go up one tire size at stock ride height, then that's the tire size I want to run, but I want to increase the clearance.
Right.
Yes.
Run the taller, longer shock. Yeah.
So if I can't fit the tire size stock, I'm not even going to put it on there if it's lifted.
Right. Because it's going to start tearing parts off.
Because that's when you start running into the concerns. Like sure, I can get a 225 65 17 under there. It came with a 225 60 17. I can get a little bit more sidewall in their stock, but I'm going to hit things because it's not bumped correctly. So if I lift it, that will help me for the clearance.
Right. Get the bigger tire in there.
But I'm not going to go to a 275 65 17 because now I'm back into the situation I was when I was trying to fit a little bit larger tire on the stock suspension. So you're one-upping your situation. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, these are designed to put a bigger tire on it. There's more clearance here. There's more bump stop extension.
And more importantly, they're valved. They're valved adequately to run a larger tire.
And also
So you can, but you need to be aware that the shift points are going to be, it's not going to drive the same.
Yep.
Shifting's not going to be the same.
Right.
The tire's going to be heavier.
And it's tough on a CVT.
Yeah.
So,
But you know, if you want a little more clearance between the ground and the oil pan, you know, that's a great way to get it. So,
yeah, and back to these, you know, our TerraSport being valve specifically for a little bit larger tire. This goes back to like the spacer kits, whether you're putting it on a cab on chassis or whether you're putting a spacer kit on a Subaru. You put a spacer kit on, you're keeping the stock dampers. They did nothing to the valving to control that additional weight that you're hanging off the front end of the vehicle, or that you're cycling.
Right.
You're cycling more weight, maybe an offset wheel.
And
so
it's
put
not,
something on there that not only lifts it, but it's tuned a little more aggressively to control all that energy.
And it's not just about weight. I mean, we actually have live bodies that drive around in these cars and tune that suspension for what we think you're going to do as far as modification, but also to put a more lively feel back in the drive, knowing that you're going to take this vehicle out on a dirt road or places that the stock suspension, now that we're using a larger tire and stuff like that, wouldn't handle the way it's built anymore. So like Junior said, a more, not really aggressive valving, but just a more tuned valving for...
Well, it's tuned for that situation.
That driving situation.
It's tuned for daily driving. They're tested on gravel, dirt roads to perform in both situations.
Optimized for soft roading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, this is great.
I think, if I'm being honest, I think we did a little more than soft roading with Chelsea.
We probably...
I was going to say, are we going to bring up Chelsea launching?
We have to talk about that every time we talk about CUV, right?
She hooked that thing right over that railroad track, man.
I actually went back to that spot this year, and I was going to take pictures of it, and I looked at that G-out. It's a pretty significant incident there. That's a big bump.
Yeah.
And
like I was driving.
We were in the Bronco.
Yeah, you were there telling me.
Filming the deer.
Yeah, because you were like, oh, watch out for Bambi.
Yeah.
And I just saw it huck like that. And I saw the whole new skid plate system and everything that we had put in.
You saw the Asphere logo on the skid plate?
So... I mean, if that's what you plan to do with it, it can handle it. We don't recommend it, but
understand it takes more components to make that work than just the damper.
Yeah,
your top mount assembly you can thrash that by beating on the car. Your coil spring can fatigue. There's all kinds of other components
it's a system.
That's not damper related.
Yeah. You generally don't want to beat that car.
No,
you want to take it easy. Yeah. You want to take it easy.
That's why we call it soft roading.
You know, Chelsea's a little crazy.
Yeah.
But
she definitely pushes the limits of the suspension.
But normally you want to drive along
wide open water crossings.
Exactly.
Chelsea with the wide open water crossings.
No, that was for media purposes. Yeah.
Well, think about what we did with the car. We put on the TerraSport, fixed. Chelsea had a spacer kit on there that overextended everything. We first had to replace all the driveline to fix all
even
the
the steering knuckle seized up or something, right?
So we put the TerraSports on. Now you have correct geometry. You went up size on the tires. You drove 12, 13 hours,
right?
On like 15.
On the 15.
Then it went some serious days off-roading on Onion Creek.
We did Onion Creek.
Yep.
We did some other off-roading and drove it all the way home.
Yep.
You know, that's what this is, something that you can drive. It's not going to fall apart on you when you get to Moab or when you drove 8 hours to Mammoth from here and you get there and your whole suspension fell apart.
Yep.
Like this is like essentially like kind of an OE geometry, OE spec.
And we got to also understand that people are taking these vehicles on challenges that the vehicles shouldn't be on. Like
all the time.
You know, I see Subarus in Moab all the time.
All the time.
You know, and you see them and they're on the backside of like Hell's Revenge, and you're like, I know what it took to get here. How did you get here?
I don't know how they do it.
Like the Cayenne that's out there every year.
Yeah.
That V8 Cayenne.
That's heavily modified, though.
That one's pretty modified.
Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's still independent front strut suspension. It's still, you know what I mean? It's like a Eurowise kit or something that's on there. But
we heard stories of a guy driving a stock Lincoln Continental around out there. Do you guys ever hear those stories?
No, it's actually not a Lincoln Continental. It's a Crown Victoria.
Crown Victoria. You are correct.
Yeah.
So
I see him all the time, just spun out of his mind.
The premier soft roader is a Crown Victoria.
I think some Subaru people have a chip on their shoulder where they're like, they want to prove they can go
Yeah,
on the Jeep trail.
capable vehicle.
They
yeah.
like love their car so much, they want to prove it.
Can't do it though, man.
They want to prove it.
Even a
But they
cab
go
on chassis.
far.
They go far,
Yeah.
but they go again, not qualifying the vehicle. They go farther than they should.
Yeah, and that goes back to having good trail
And I think-
trail companions at that point.
That was first and foremost in our brain when we manufactured this, that they're going to take these to levels that they shouldn't.
Right.
Of course.
You know what I mean? So Subarus stay on graded roads and camping and out of
Yeah, we were looking forward to this
Off of
topic
Jeep trails.
for quite some time, and like I said, the Matt's Off-Road shows really drilled it into me that perhaps this would be something we might want to share with our viewers and our listeners, and we hope that everybody is able to take something away from this and hopefully enjoys being out soft-roading rather than being stuck somewhere with 2 flat tires or in a mud puddle where they can't get towed out of. And if you have questions or comments, or you want to add to anything that we talked about today, definitely put it down in the comments section, and I'll let Shane and Junior have one last chance at anything they want to say.
first gen RAV4s, first gen CRVs. That is going to be the future go-to adventure vehicle.
Okay. Any final thoughts, Shane?
Put on this TerraSport and have a good old time, and don't think about it ever again.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for joining us, and we're looking forward to seeing you on the next episode of Shock Talk.